When was the last time you felt real awe? And what if that feeling is a career clue? Chris Baron followed the signal from science and sales into documentary filmmaking, and his work has taken him inside volcanoes, deep into caves, and at the top of skyscrapers. If you've been successful on paper but wondering about what could be, this episode is for you. This is the Your Next Success podcast, and I am your host, Dr. Carolyn Sengel. I am a life-first career coach and strategist on a mission to normalize questioning your career, because I believe each of us is made on purpose for a purpose only we can fulfill. The longer we live out of alignment with who we are, what we do best, and why we are here, the more we miss out, and the more the world misses out on what only we can give. The Your Next Success podcast is where we explore how to build a career that truly fuels your life. We talk about self-discovery, smart job search strategies, professional growth, and you will hear stories from people who have navigated big career transitions themselves, so you can create a life-first career and become your own version of authentic success, one that is aligned, meaningful, and truly yours. Chris Baron is an award-winning filmmaker, storyteller, and host of the podcast No Ordinary Monday. He is the founder and director of Frontier Films and has spent more than a decade creating documentaries that bring science, nature, and adventure to life for global audiences. His work includes projects for National Geographic, Disney+, CuriosityStream, and the BBC, including living inside a volcano for One Strange Rock and leading series like Evolve and Lift the Ice. Some careers look impressive and still feel wrong inside your own skin. That disconnect is information, not failure. In today's episode, you'll hear how Chris built a career shaped by awe and curiosity. You'll hear the moment he realized success on paper didn't feel right inside, why he walked away from a major bonus to take an unpaid internship, and how that decision led to documentary filmmaking. You'll also hear why awe isn't just inspiration, it's information, and how paying attention to what makes you feel alive can become a powerful guide for your own career decisions. If you've been doing the right things and still feel a quiet pull towards something more aligned, this conversation is for you. Welcome, Chris, to Your Next Success. Just looking at the multitude of different places your journey has gone, I'm so excited. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Carolyn, for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be on the show.
Awesome. I love talking about careers, career transitions, people's journey as it unfolds, and yours is going to be spectacular. But if we could dial it way back at first, help us understand, where were you born? What was life like for really young Chris?
Well, this is a usual conversation I have with people. I meet someone for the first time, for example, and they're like, oh, where are you from? And I either have to give them the short version. If it's just someone, I'm like, oh, I'll just meet you in small talk and we go again. Or if it's someone significant, I'll be like, okay, I'll give you the full story. Because it's you, Carolyn, I'll give you the full story.
Love it. Thanks, Chris.
I was born in Perth, Australia. I don't have an Australian accent. I probably have, I guess some people might call a soft Scottish lilt and / an international accent. But so I was born in Australia, and my mum is Australian. My dad is Scottish. And when I was about 18 months old, my family moved from Australia to Dubai, and we were there till I was maybe 3 or 4. I can't remember. I don't even have a memory of it. It was that long ago. I have very faint memories of it.
Firstly, it's just already starting to be fascinating because your mom was from Australia, your dad was from Scotland. So it's just like, wait, how'd that happen? And then, at 18 months old, we just choose to move to Dubai. What did they do for work that allowed this?
Well, travel. Well, my dad is a geologist. And so he worked in the energy business and started working in the oil industry in Scotland. And he was transferred or moved from Scotland to Australia, but was still within the energy business.
Yeah.
And met my mum when he was in Australia and had me. And then I think he got another job posting again in Dubai and then another one. So it's a very traveling sort of, it's either when I say my background, people go, okay, you're either one of two things. You're either a military brat or an oil and gas brat.
Mhm.
So it's kind of both of those sort of my parents' careers. It could have been one or the other because they travel so much. So by the time I was 5, I think, or so, I was living in Houston, Texas.
And was your mom also working?
So she would find jobs wherever we ended
Ah,
up. So, in Houston, for example, she worked as a travel agent for an Australian
oh,
travel
cool.
agency because
Yeah.
obviously she knew Australia so well. And a lot of American clients were like, oh, go to Australia. And her knowledge was obviously, great for that. And
Yeah.
then when she was in Dubai, she'd work in like a medical clinic, things like that. So, but it was really following my dad's career around and also raising my brother and I, which, as you can appreciate, is probably a full-time job raising 2 boys.
Yes, full-time excitement. And I feel like each individual day might be really challenging, but then the times where I can reflect back on the past week, the past month, the past year, the past decade, it's like, oh, wow, that was awesome. But when I'm overtired,
I'm sure there's all sorts of things that my mum would like to say right now, but
perhaps, right? But maybe now at this point, she's just so doggone proud of you. All she remembers is the amazing stuff because it's a little bit removed. All right. So now you're like, we're back to 5 years old. You're in Houston, Texas. And what did you love doing in that early age?
I mean, as a kid, you kind of just go with the flow. I think that as a child, you just go, okay, great, we're going to a new place, and you turn up at a new place, and you're in a new school, and you're adapting, and you're meeting new people, and it's exciting, And I was a energetic kid running around, so I got into sports all the time, and it was easy with sports because you just make friends really easily. It was all just effortless in that regard. But I remember Houston being an exciting place. I got into like Tex-Mex food and all that sort of stuff growing up. And we lived in sort of like one of the places we lived was kind of close to a bayou. And so I'd like, get on my bike and go down to the bayou, and there's like a rope swing into the water and
Oh,
just kind of
wow.
getting into trouble and like, nothing serious, but just being boys. It was great. It was super exciting. I loved Houston. And funnily enough, once I left when I was a little bit older and did my other travels, and then I came back for a shoot when I was kind of in my like mid-20s. And we're kind of traveling around the same streets, and nothing had changed, and some
Oh,
things had
wow.
changed, but other things
Yeah.
hadn't changed. And it was such a blast from the past.
Did you find the rope
Uh,
swing?
no, we didn't find the rope swing, but we drove past my old house. It was kind of
Yeah,
weird and
that's always
exciting
nice.
because,
Yeah.
we used to sort of live on this fun little road, and all the neighbors, we used to play like street hockey and stuff. And there was super fun memories back.
That's awesome. And where did you go for vacation? That's the other thing I always wonder with these like big international traveling families. Like, do you just stay at home or do you go to some other remarkably fascinating place?
No, we were very, very fortunate. I grew up in a middle class family, so we probably have like a nice international vacation every year. So I think maybe when I was 6 or 7, one of my first big memories of a vacation was when my dad took us to a place called Angel Fire. And I think that is a ski resort in New Mexico, maybe. But it was the first time I'd ever tried skiing. I was just enamored with this idea of like getting on these 2 planks and like screaming down a hill at a million miles an hour and terrifying my mother. So we went skiing, and I remember going to Egypt when I was far too young to appreciate it. I had a great time,
Yeah.
but like I was 11 or 12, and it's fun seeing the pyramids, but you just don't appreciate
Yeah.
how lucky you are to sort of be in these places when you're a child. Going back for shoot again, I went back to Egypt a couple of times for filming projects, and just being immersed in a different way, and going, oh man, I was here when I was a kid, but I just didn't appreciate it. We had some fantastic holidays growing up, and sometimes they were just in the States as well. I remember one amazing one. We took an RV from Houston, and we drove up all the way through, like all the way to Yosemite and all
Oh,
those different
wow.
national parks with my family and one of our friends' family.
And
And
are you
that
still
was,
friends?
yeah, yeah, friends of my parents' family. So they didn't have kids at the time.
Ah, oh,
It
but
was just the
still
6 of us
getting in an RV, right? With others
for two
can be a
weeks.
make or break experience. And yet also, I think like for your development of growing up, like this kind of exploration it was already happening at a young age, and adapting to the environment that you're in and just kind of like getting along and enjoying and being peaceful. Like these are, I mean, is it nature or nurture? I don't know, but it was cool that from a really young age, you were able to develop some of these things that have been absolutely foundational for some of the experiences that you have now, though.
100%. And again, we were so lucky to have those opportunities. But I do remember that we did a lot of traveling, but I was always the one pushing to go further. You know, like we went to the Grand Canyon, for example, and I remember, and I was maybe, I can't remember how old, 9, 8, something like that. And there was we got to the Grand Canyon, we were at the top, and there was a trail that goes down to the bottom where you go all the way down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And I remember being distraught because my dad was like, no, we can't go down. You know, we need water. It's going to take like an entire day. And I was like, no, we can go. I want to go. And just wanting to like push the boundaries of like, you know, what we can go and explore. So that was always, and it's still a part of me. It's kind of like, you know, you get to the edge of where you're supposed to go, whether it's a cave or climbing a tree when I was a kid or whatever, and be like, I just want to go a little bit further.
What's on the other side? What's down there?
Yeah.
Now, when did you get introduced to starting to capture what was happening around you, like photography or videos or any of that? Like, when did that piece enter the picture?
So when I was about, I'm guessing about 11 or so, we'd left Houston, another big move, and we'd gone back to Dubai. So that was kind of for my early school and then moving into high school. So I didn't finish my elementary school in the States. So I had to like go to the American school in Dubai and then decide whether I'm going to stay in the American system or go to the British system. And eventually my parents decided they're going to swap me to the British system. So I had to rejig all of my curriculum and take extra French classes because I'd learned Spanish.
What were the big differences, I guess? English class was more proper?
I can't remember. I mean, I remember sport was big in both of them. I mean, the French and Spanish thing was big because obviously I think, you know, those two curriculums are massive. And apart from that, I can't really remember, to be honest. The British system felt more structured in some way. But yeah, I do have interesting memories of having to swap curriculums at sort of a key point of my development.
Yeah. And also, though, being introduced to different languages as well.
And we had to learn Arabic when we went to that school as well. I think it was state mandated that schools have to teach Arabic. So I did learn a little bit of Arabic and a little bit of French and have a little bit of Spanish. And so you have a little taste of all these little languages.
Though. Yeah. How phenomenal has that also been? Just some of these things that you were immersed in as a child become pretty useful as, you know, all these places all over the world.
I learned little snippets of all of them, but not enough to have like, you know, I couldn't have a full conversation in Spanish anymore. I could maybe have a broken conversation in French. I could maybe say like a few words in Arabic because I don't use them regularly enough. I'm in Indonesian now and learning, you know, Bahasa Indonesian. It gives you the sort of, you lose that fear of like trying to dive into a new language, I guess. It's not as daunting. You learn a lot of languages the same way, you know, through the basics and the numbers and the sort of basic vocabulary and your standard greetings and stuff. So you kind of have a little bit of like a route path through each of them. So you go, okay, great. I know where to start and I know sort of how to learn the bits. I just have to learn what this particular language, how it works.
I feel like there's a lot in communication that it doesn't necessarily matter what language someone's speaking. You can kind of tell what they're saying a bit, right? If they're talking about you in a kind or an unkind way, you pick up on that, you know?
Yep. Well, it's interesting. The body language, a huge amount of our communication is through body language. And so I play soccer here with, you know, a bunch of Indonesian guys, and not all of them speak English. So I'm going out there, communicating in my broken Indonesian, and then obviously they're having full conversations in Indonesian, sometimes about me because I'll hear my name come up, but they're all very friendly. You can kind of know a little bit what they're saying. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so we were talking about also, you switched back to Dubai and now from the American and the British system, and then, but I'm still curious, like, where did this photography seed start?
That's where the photography, thank you for reminding me. Okay, so we're in Dubai, and this is the strangest thing. So I remember being, and I must have been 12 or so by this point, and we did some exam or some sort of assessment. And I think it was like not even like a school assessment, but it's like, are you a visual person or are you an auditory person? And I remember always thinking in my head, like, I'm a visual person, blah, 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 blah. But then the test told me you're an auditory person. And I'm like, absolutely not. This is ridiculous. And it almost sort of further pushed me. I was like, I'm going to be a visual person. And I think, I don't know, if like internet was getting up at that time, and the Flickr was like a photo website that some people may remember. I started going onto there, and I got into like black and white photography, and then I started talking to my dad about it, and they bought me this really, very cheap digital camera, which is one of the first digital cameras in the days. And I remember just going for hours down to the beach in Dubai and experimenting with different photos I could take, long exposure, short exposure, black and white, color. And I just love the medium. And I still, now that I'm in podcasting, I'm like, maybe I am an auditory person doing all the sound design and stuff. But I've kind of come to terms with that now, going full circle through the visual medium of documentaries. But I remember just being so proud when I took a photo and I'm like, that's a cool photo. And then showing someone else and they're like, wow, that is a cool photo. And it's just something as simple as that, someone else recognizing that you're like, that is cool. You created something that's interesting. And I think that for me, photography is very much like it can evoke emotions. And I think I learned that at an age where I was, becoming a preteen, teenager,
Yes.
developing emotions for the first time, complex emotions, and then looking at photos and seeing black and white. It was always black and white photography for some reason with me. And I felt like they told stories in a single image that you didn't have to have words or moving pictures to sort of feel.
Yeah.
And I think subconsciously I was like, this is really cool. And I've always had a camera at some point, throughout my life, and just loved the visual medium, creating stuff.
Oh, that's so cool. And in school, were you developing a fascination for storytelling with words as well? Or how did that come?
I
mean, a
I was
picture's worth
always
1,000 words, right? So imagine
That's
how many
true.
words you've already captured.
Yeah, that's true. But I do remember, again, about that same time, like I would write poems and poetry and little short things and show them to my dad. It didn't go any further than my own family, but he was encouraging me to sort of, try creative writing and all that kind of stuff, because I was never an artist. I could never draw or paint or do any. My dad tried to make me musical or tried to give me the opportunity to be musical. And so I learned piano for a while, but I just memorized the muscle movements. I never learned the music. I liked music as a medium, as a listener, but I was not very good musician, to be honest. So
I hear you.
it was kind of, writing was a way of doing that. Photography was a way of doing that. And I was pretty good at English at school, but I never really sort of felt myself as I'm going to be a writer when I grew up. I sort of fell, I don't know how early this was, but I had a pretty good affinity for sciences, not necessarily mathematics or stuff, but certainly biology, and things like that. So I got into that pretty early. And yeah, so I just kind of had this part of my being, my personality, that I kind of had as a separate part of my academics life. Because it's like, great, academics, I can just focus on the science aspect and, be good at all the rest, but not really think about that as a career. I had it sort of in the back pocket, as it were.
Like a fun
as a
hobby,
sort of,
like a side thing.
yeah, as a side thing, but I never really considered it something that I would ever do as a job. I'd never be a writer or an author or study literature at university. That didn't necessarily interest me. It was still the science. I was a very curious. I loved nature. I loved being outside. And my dad, being a geologist, he always instilled, a curiosity about the world and in science itself, and introduced me to, I remember very vividly as a kid watching loads of volcano documentaries that Nat Geo put out. So he had like VHSs of those, and it's like, rather than put on like a kid's movie, he's like, oh, why don't you watch these like science docs? And I've got we probably watched them tons of times. So he was very clearly, I don't know whether he was I think he was probably just trying to introduce me to like, look how cool science is, and you could be a scientist. And
Yeah. And I mean, the quality of children's programming when I was a child, and I don't know, you might be younger than me, honestly, but it wasn't that great. So it could also have been if we're going to have to watch something, let's make sure it's something I like too,
It could be that. He's like, I'm sick of Sesame Street. Let's watch something.
Now, what did you think that success meant or the world of work meant from that childhood lens?
I mean, from a childhood lens, I think, again, I'm speaking only from my own perspective, but a child probably first and foremost is just trying to impress their parents. I think trying to, from when you're going to school, you get a report card, and when you get A's, you get praise, and, it's good and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. If you get F's or D's or whatever, it's like, it's not good. You need to shape up and you need to do better and all that kind of stuff. So I guess success is kind of instilled from you is impressing your parents. And that's probably sticks with you probably until you leave school, I imagine. Then you start sort of forming peer groups. And I guess after that, it's on top of impressing your parents, which I think probably sticks with you your entire life to a certain level. It probably decreases over time, but then you're competitive with your peers. Success is being the best of your peers. I am top of my class. I am top of my work group at work, at the office or whatever. It's probably not until you reach at least your mid-career. And again, I'm only 39, so I'm, kind of...
There we go.
At
There's
this
a
stage.
decade there. I've got a decade on you. Watch out.
Yeah.
This is what's next.
It's trying to figure out like beyond all that stuff, because, you made your parents proud or whatever, and you've kind of succeeded within your peer group. And, it's kind of then like, okay, great. What do I have to do to impress myself? And that, I think, is the hardest part of defining success. Is like, how do you feel successful when you're the only one you're comparing yourself to?
Yes. Yes. That's a journey.
I think that's
that's a journey.
that's a longer journey, I think.
And even though it's a longer journey, you paid attention to clues and you made decisions true to you. At times, others would have overridden and gone with what the status quo was. Because there are certain times of it's normal to question your life and question your career, and you have opportunities to make changes at those set points. And, things can happen by choice or by force, but typically it's around 15 to 18, maybe 22 to 26, and then every 7 to 10 years after. And so what's also fascinating about parts of your story is that they line up nicely with those, and you gathered data and made a decision for yourself. We were in Dubai, and you've now been introduced to some photography. You definitely have this exploring. You have some storytelling, perhaps not in a traditional way that you would think, just through words only. And then what? Because you moved from Dubai, then yet another place, I think.
Yeah, so I moved to Dubai with my family when they moved. I was about 11. And by the age of 15, I think my parents were like, they could kind of see what happens with a lot of kids who, especially the ones who stick around Dubai from an early age and go through the school system. And, Dubai is, for people who have been there, it's an extraordinary place, don't get me wrong. It's very different to a lot of other parts of the world in that for expats in particular, you have a lot of stuff done for you. It's not a difficult life as a kid growing up there. You've probably got someone at work, like a housemaid or something like that, or a helper that does a lot of the stuff. And I think what happened with some of the kids that my parents saw from their friends who'd been born and bred in the school system, they'd left the school system, gone back to wherever country was home, South Africa, Australia, America, UK, whatever, and gone to university there and struggled, quote unquote. That's the real world, in some respects. It's not everything's not done for you. Things are not as easy. You got to figure stuff out yourself. And some of them couldn't hack it. They came back and they either finished the university or didn't, and then came back to Dubai and lived and worked in Dubai. Mm-hmm. And so my parents were like, we don't want that for our kids. So they sort of said, we'll send you to boarding school. And I had an opportunity to go to boarding school in Scotland in a lovely school called Dollar Academy, which is a fantastic sports school and academically as well. And I went to Dollar. Again, it was sort of even halfway through a term, I think. I wasn't even finishing this. It wasn't between school years.
They just made a decision and just, there you go.
Oh.
And they stayed in Dubai while you went to Scotland?
Yep. I got on a plane.
Did your brother go too?
No, he stayed in Dubai. I was on my own. And he did join me a couple of years later. So that was good. But I went there and it was fantastic. It was, again, I think having those previous jumps just helped me to adjust quicker, because when you're used to so much change, you kind of just you observe the social fabric, the social dynamic, how those kind of communication things work, how peers work, how bullying works, how,
Yeah.
all those kinds of things. You kind of just figure out the system. And then once you figured it out, then you just slot in wherever you slot in. And yeah, so again, going back to the science thing, I had a great science and biology teacher, which really inspired me and accelerated that sort of love of science in me. And I got to the point of finishing at school. I had to choose which university courses I wanted to do. And to very briefly explain to people how the choices work in the British system is that when you do all your exams and you essentially choose you have 6 slots for different university courses, and you might choose like, I want to go and do medicine. So you go do medicine at like Edinburgh or Oxford or St. Andrews or wherever, and you put your first choice as number 1 and blah, blah. And depending on how your grades are and depending on your applications to those various universities, if your number 1 gets selected, great, you go there. If not, then you hope number 2 works, and then so on and so on. So I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do medicine. And I had a meeting in my last year with the careers counsellor of the school. And I remember this so vividly. And he basically sort of called me in and says, okay, so what do you like to, what subjects do you like doing? And I said, well, I love sports, really enjoy sports. And I also love science. I love biology and stuff. He said, oh, okay, so why don't you just do sports science? I was like, okay, that sounds fun. What is that? So we talked a little bit about it, but there was no further interrogation of like whether that was really something for me. It's like, okay, great, I guess I'll go do sports science then. And, as a 17-year-old, maybe at that point, I was like, okay, cool, I guess I could do a career in sports science. I like sports, I like science, whatever. So 4 of those first 6 slots, I did sports science applications. And I had 2 left. So I was like, okay, I'll throw some wild cards in. One of the wild cards was photography at one of the universities in Scotland. And another wild card was forensic biology. And because I was like, I think CSI was popular at the time. Oh, that would be cool,
Yeah.
And so from sending out that sort of 6 applications or whatever, it takes a few months for all the reviews to come in and whatever. And I'd met a few people, like friends of friends, that had actually gone and done sports science. And I was like, man, this is not what I want to do. Like, I don't really want to be a physio. I don't want to be a coach necessarily. It's just not me. And long story short, I ended up I think I got a few of those sports science. I was accepted, but obviously you don't have to go through it if you don't want to. So I rejected those ones, and I decided not to do photography because I wanted to do something slightly more academic. And the last one left was forensic biology. And that's what I went and did. And so I went to Glasgow and did forensic biology at university, and it's a 4-year course. And I think I figured out probably within maybe the second year that forensic biology was probably not the career that I wanted, but I would finish the course regardless because, again, like forensic biology is great, it's super interesting, like crime scenes, blood splatter analysis, DNA, all those kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the career itself was what I believed was you sit in a lab, you get maybe a shoe comes in with some blood on it, and you cut out the little blood spot from the shoe, then you put it in the robot, get the DNA sequencing results, you print it out, and then you write the report and you stand up in court and present it, and then essentially rinse and repeat over and over again. And I was like, man, it's not scratching the itch that I want. I finished that course and then decided to do a research master's, which is kind of like a mini PhD in molecular microbiology.
How did you choose that?
Because, well, it was interesting that after I'd finished the forensic course, I think you do a number of different courses within forensics. So you go and do classes within microbiology and blah, 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 blah. So you get your basics in science. And I sort of got quite friendly with the microbiology professor. And he mentioned to me that they do a summer internship, sort of scholarship thing. And I applied for that and got it. And so I spent the summer 2 months or 3 months in the lab with all the PhD students, the postdocs. And I was like, this is cool. Like, researching science, trying to find out new stuff, answering questions, exploring new frontiers and all that kind of stuff. And felt like I was actually doing something that was like problem solving. And so he said, well, if you want to keep doing this, you can apply for the master's course. And I ended up doing that. And so I did a master's in molecular microbiology and did a little mini research project, and which was essentially, there's a particular kind of bacteria that makes the majority of antibiotics for human and veterinary use. And so we were trying to sort of do some tweaking of the DNA to make it more efficient so it needs less food and less resources. So all that kind of stuff. So it was super fun. So that was kind of like my journey from school into university.
Really,
yeah.
And now, aside from the internship and the lab, did you have any other jobs as a, younger person?
I think the first job I remember having was when I was back in Dubai, I guess maybe 15 or so, and like the local summer camp or whatever needed counselors and whatever. So that's what I did. I went and spent a summer camp being a counselor and organizing games and
activities and
kids
adventures. And was there like
yeah.
canoeing or where did rock climbing come into all of this?
Oh, that was a little bit later. I think I rock climbed as a kid, but I didn't get back into it till I was in my 20s. But I was always climbing. But no, it was kind of like, it might be at like the local sports facility or the country club or whatever, where all the kids would have the summer off and the parents just wanted to dump them for the day. And we would play various games, like be soccer or they'd be in the pool or whatever, and just making sure that they're safe and they're having fun and yeah, that kind of stuff. So that was probably one of my first jobs that I can remember. But when I was at university, I did a bunch of stuff. Most kids, university students.
Well, now we can say kids, but at that time it sure didn't feel like a kid. And my kid doesn't feel like he's a kid, but yeah.
Adults, 100%. I worked in a bar, worked in a number of bars at that time. I worked in like a retail supplemental stuff in the evenings, the weekends to make up money for living, paying for parties and alcohol and all that sort of stuff you do at university.
the fun things. But this is cool because it's like still your adventure, still this connection and this observing and experiencing different lifestyles wherever you are. Like these are all coming into play and it's fascinating. Okay, so you have this master's degree and now that's ending and you have to start choosing what are you going to do next. What went into that decision and how did you choose that next chapter?
The natural place for anyone doing that master's, the research master's, is a PhD. Essentially, even a lot of PhD courses, if you go straight from and this might just be a Scotland only thing, but if you go straight from an undergraduate degree to a PhD, usually the first year might be a master's course anyways.
Yeah.
As you know, yeah.
That's how mine was. Well, it was almost like some people went into it saying they were going to get a master's. Other people got into it a little bit and decided, I'm going to take this master's route. Instead of, because after the research part ends, after the core courses end, and whatever the project is, it just gets really subjective, undefined, and your life becomes at the other end of 4 or 5 people's decision of whether what you've done is enough and novel enough in some sort of thing. And it just becomes a massive obstacle course. And some choose that they don't feel like playing that game,
Exactly. I was kind of like, okay, great, I've done my master's, I got my master's, and I guess I go do a PhD now. And what do I want to do a PhD on? And I was like, okay, microbiology's cool. They didn't have any PhDs available in the lab I was in, so I was like, great, I have to go outside, have a look, see what's around. I like virology as well as microbiology. Maybe I can get a virology thing. And I did a number of interviews. Some went better than others. And I think I started questioning whether a PhD was right for me, whether I wanted to be, because to know as a doctor, a holder yourself, you've got to be so focused on a tiny little corner of science or whatever field that you're studying. And it may be irrelevant. And to go back to my master's, I learned something. I learned a brutal truth about science in that master's course. And it was unfortunate, but I don't want to bore your listeners with the genetics of things. But essentially, I did this entire master's course to try and insert a gene inside the DNA of the genome of the microbe. And basically what happened is it failed. And we didn't know that it failed after the entire year because it's hard to sequence the genome. Long story short, I did an entire year of work only to find out that just basically by a simple fluke of biology that everything had failed. And I was like, ouch, that hurts. Okay, great. I guess I learned a lot personally, but I didn't get a paper out of it or anything like that because it's just one of those unfortunate things about biology. And I was like, okay, great. And I was like, that could easily happen in a PhD as well. Do I want to
Yes.
spend 4 years this time doing the same thing? At the same time, I also met a lot of people doing PhDs. It's like, wow, you guys aren't all together that happy sometimes, you know?
There was oh my goodness, our building was a glass building, beautiful. It's a polymer science building in Akron, Ohio. And it was tall. I mean, it doesn't look like Dubai or anything, but it was a taller, all glass, gorgeous building that from the skyline you can see. And so from the outside looking in, it looks so glorious and like
Yeah.
fascinating and futuristic. And then from the inside looking out, I remember there was a friend who started the year before me, and he was on the same floor. On one side was the synthesis side, and on the other side was the more material science side. And I had chosen, I didn't want to be shaking separatory funnels and building things. I wanted to break things. So I was on the other side of the building. But we would pass each other on the way to or from the restroom, for example, or just, getting out and having a breather. And there were plants along the edge of that row of windows where you could take some stairs down, and there was just a shelf. And I didn't notice at first, but he said, "Did you notice? Even these plants are dying. They're dying. It's not that, and there's plenty of sunlight, right?" So he's like, "There's something in this building. It just makes
Yeah.
things die." And I
Yeah.
was like, whoa.
It's just the bad energy.
It's very. He's since gone on to be a very nice professor at a different university. But
Yeah.
I should call him and ask him if he has plants and how they're doing. But yeah, there were, as much
Yeah.
as it's like this forefront of science and all of that, again, almost like parenting, like the day-to-day reality doesn't feel so novel and exciting.
Exactly. And it's tough. I have a huge amount of respect. My wife has a PhD as well. I have a huge amount of respect for anyone that can successfully defend their thesis at the end of the day, because that's, going through a viva is not easy. That's intense. And your entire 4 years of work has led up to this defense of standing in front of 5 or 6 professors and for a few hours and being grilled intensely. And
yes. And you're like, oh, and then even trying to prepare for that, I'm like, oh, I got to go back and study all the courses and all the things and how it led up to today. And like, yeah. What's her
it's
PhD in?
tough. I think it's biophysics,
Oh,
a lot
cool.
of crystallization, crystallography of proteins and things like that. She's in pharmacology, or basically in pharmaceutical biotech now. So it's basically figure out how drug interactions work and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's
but
so
the
cool.
sort of real molecular level pharmacy stuff. So yeah.
Very fascinating. Okay. All right. So you're there and you're starting to realize, and you're kind of going on some PhD interviews, and you're thinking, I'm not quite so sure. And then what happened?
So I had to get a job. I needed money. And so I was like, if it's not going to be the academic route, what have I got open to me? And I started looking because I still love science. I was like, I can use my master's to try and get a job in some kind of science stuff. And I found a job in essentially scientific sales, selling equipment and consumables to laboratories, And I thought, in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, well, this is cool because I haven't found the PhD that I'd like yet. But if I do this job for maybe a year or something, I'll get to meet a lot of professors. And then maybe I'll meet one and be like, you have a really cool project or field of interest or whatever, research interest, and maybe I can come do a PhD with you. So that was my logic. I was like, and I can earn money while doing it.
And so was it a manufacturer or like a distributor, or like what were the things?
God, I think it was probably both. It was a big one. I think the company, it was a global company. So when I got the job, which was interesting, they had a hub in Glasgow and Europe and the States. And I think the main head office was in the States. And I do think that they were a manufacturer as well as a distributor of stuff. And they developed their own equipment and all that kind of stuff. So it was your job to learn the product line and sell it to labs and, try and get people to switch over to their products and all that kind of stuff.
And did you get sales training?
Yes. So I applied for the job and we got called for an assessment day. Do you know what an assessment day is?
Tell me.
So an assessment day, essentially, and I had no idea what it was either so it's not an interview? No, it's an assessment day. I was like, okay. And it's basically like, I would describe it as a mass interview. Like there would be 100 people on this assessment day and they're all vying for maybe 15 or 20 jobs.
Oh, wow.
And so the whole day, and sometimes they're 2 days, but I think mine was a day, you turn up at wherever it is and you essentially have a series of group exercises, role play exercises, one-on-one interviews, and they're basically observing all of these 100 people to see who they want to hire. And yeah, so I kind of went into it without any expectations, just thought I'll just do my best and whatever, and got hired, which I was happy with at the time. And they flew us all from that cohort to Carlsbad in California for 4 weeks of sales training.
Imagine what your life would be like if your career aligned with who you are, what you do best, and actually fueled the life you want. At Next Success, we support all ages and stages through career transitions, from students exploring majors or careers to job seekers actively searching or reimagining their next move to professionals committed to self-awareness and leadership growth. Stay connected and explore what's possible at nextsuccesscareers.com and follow Next Success Method on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
And I was like, put us up in a hotel, and I was like, this is cool, getting put up and going through seminars and getting the whole product line described to us and making sure we knew it and grilling us and testing us and putting us through scenarios and role play, one-on-one face-to-face role play, phone role play, going through scripts and stuff, the whole shebang. And, but at the same time, it was fun because the senior salespeople were there. They were kind of being like, hey, look at the lifestyle. We were drinking vodka in the jacuzzi, afterwards, and showing all the young graduates like, hey, this is what's in store for you if you stick it out in this job. And so I did the sales training, and I remember very clearly having what would you call it? Not an altercation, but just, a healthy discussion with one of the trainers, which kind of was around the subject of, as a salesperson, when do you take no as an answer? And their philosophy is obviously you never take no as an answer. And me as a consumer and being at the other end of that, I'm like, 3 times probably the most. And then I start getting annoyed and I don't want to work with you or buy your product ever again. But I sort of had this backwards and forwards with this guy in a seminar, and I was like, really? How do you not piss off the customer when you just keep saying like, no, I'm not listening. Essentially, I'm not listening to you, and this is why you need to buy our product. And I'm sure there's a lot of salespeople listening right now going, having their own opinions. But just me personally, I was like, I guess I put myself too much in other people's shoes and, see myself from other people's perspective. And it's probably good in some ways to try and understand your problem and your need.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you also have to switch off part of your brain where you're like, okay, no, I'm going to keep pushing and pushing to get that sale. And that was probably the first red flag for me going into that job. And over the months and months and months, we did, quarterly sales meetings and all that kind of stuff, and went out to meet professors and did all the stuff I was hoping to do, long story short, with that, I didn't meet any professors that had cool stuff. So that plan went out the window. But it was kind of the third quarter sales meeting. So I'd started in January, beginning of January. And this was probably the Q3 sales meeting. And everyone comes together from all over Europe and stuff. So there's, like 1,000 people from the company descend on some Hilton conference room. And they're all spreadsheets on the screen and congratulating themselves about how much money they've made and competing with other tables and different groups and different teams. Like, oh, you guys got more than us. You get this prize. You get that prize. This guy, you guys need to do better. And why do you not sell so much? And I think at that, I got back to my hotel room and sat in my bed that night and was just like, this is, again, this is just not me. And I cannot see myself doing this for the next, I guess I was maybe early 20s then. So 45 years or whatever,
Yeah. Did it feel any sort of way? Like when you were, aside from that, like, I don't know that I want to be pushy for a sale, right? And you start seeing this whole day of spreadsheets and things, and you come back and you kind of have this realization, but like, did you feel anything in your body? Like for me at different parts, I felt like, is this food poisoning? Am I going to throw up? Like, and I'd kind of wonder, and then I'd override it. I'm like, no, it's fine. But did it show up? Was it just recurring thoughts?
I don't think I had anything as so physical as you had. I guess I was kind of like, I don't know, maybe it was an age thing. I don't know how old you were or how far through your career you were when you had those feelings.
Yeah.
But because I was still relatively young, I was kind of maybe felt like it's okay if I can fail at this
Yeah.
and try something new or try something else. And I knew I wasn't happy, I had like a girlfriend at the time, and, we were, I think we broke up around that same time as well. I don't know whether that had anything to do with it or something, but
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't happy. But it didn't manifest as like a
Thing.
physical, like
Yeah.
I felt sick or whatever, but I just knew this wasn't right. And I maybe felt, a level of like, I don't know where I'm going to go next, but it wasn't like a despair of like, my life is like whatever.
Hinging
But
on this thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's cool. And also to this date, you've been in so many places, so many experiences that just like going and starting something new is just kind of like another
Yeah.
day, another year, not necessarily like something so catastrophic. Sometimes for people who've not ever lived somewhere different, not ever had different friends than those that they started kindergarten with, it can be like a huge thing to overcome. And for you,
it's
you're just like,
overwhelming.
I'm not sure.
Well,
Yeah.
that's it. There's positives and negatives to the way I grew up. The positives being in this situation that change wasn't something that I was afraid of. I was like, if this doesn't work, I'll try something else. I didn't know what that thing would be. And I was kind of like, I'm sure I'll find something, It was kind of maybe more excited anticipation rather than anxiety or fear.
I see. Yep. Yeah. The
so
mindset.
The mindset thing. But then I didn't know at the time. But the downside is that, as you said, I don't have anywhere that I would call home necessarily. I mean, home is always where the heart is, but I don't have a hometown. I don't have friends, childhood friends that I keep in touch with regularly. I don't have like that home base necessarily where I'm like, okay, great. If I go back there, that's like my comfort blanket, whatever.
I got you.
Which a lot of people do have. They always have that place. It's like, if I go home, like, all the stuff from my childhood is there. It's all nostalgic, and they have that. Yeah, that's the one thing I'm missing from that experience, I guess.
Okay, so you're in this hotel room and you're realizing, yeah, I don't quite think I can do this for another 40-something years. And then where did that lead you?
It led me to essentially assessing my life. Where do I want to go next? I cannot do this. I cannot do this job for another 45 years. So what am I going to do with my life? And it was on the bed that night, everyone was, I was still probably half pissed. Everyone was in bed, after all the festivities and from the sales conference. And I just got Googling, and what I still recognized that I loved science. I wanted to keep that in my career. But I also love photography. And I was like, I think I probably literally Googled, what job can you do with science and photography? Documentary filmmaking came up. And very shortly after that, it was an advert for the BBC came up, because I was like, oh, the BBC has a science department. I didn't know that. So yeah, I was basically Googling on my bed, Googling what I could do with science and photography, and a job advert came up for an internship at the BBC science department. And I was like, holy crap, the BBC has a science department. That's really cool. I didn't know that existed. And so they had this internship. And literally that night, I just filled in the application, slapped on my CV, went to bed, didn't think about it. And probably thinking like, there's probably 500,000 people that are applying for the same internship, and, I'm never going to get it.
Yeah.
And literally a week later, they emailed back saying, hey, Chris, we like your CV. If you want to come and do the internship, then please, and this was like September something, and said, oh, but it'll start on the 1st of October. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I need to make a decision, because I've got to tell it's the usual few weeks of notice you've got to give to your job. And so I went to my boss and said, hey, I've got this opportunity. What's the chances of, it was a 4-week internship, unpaid. And I was like, can I take unpaid leave or something for 4 weeks? He's like, what for? He's like, well, I've got this, I've been accepted to do this internship at the BBC in the science department. And he's like, well, clearly you're not that interested in scientific sales. So what's your move here? And he's sort of like also, again, this is kind of an interesting move, but kind of telling of sales jobs potentially. But he'd calculated how much my bonus would have been if I'd stuck it out for another 3 months till the end of the full year, I guess, the end of my probation. And I'd done quite well with my sales targets. So I was like, I basically, long story short, I had a £33,000 bonus on top of my salary that was coming, which is probably, I don't know, 100% of my, 100% bonus on top of what I was already in. I was like, wow, that kind of, I remember my eyes going, oh my God, that's a lot of money for a 23-year-old or whatever. And I kind of said, okay, that's good information. Thank you. But basically what it would mean is if I did stick around, then I couldn't do the BBC thing.
Yep.
And I'd have to sort of think about it and then maybe reapply in January and then not get it and all that kind of stuff. I took the weekend to think about it and spoke to my dad and spoke to a few other friends about it. And it was an easy answer at the end of the day, as you can imagine. And, as history has shown, I quit my job and went and did the internship. And I think from day one, walking into the BBC, up in Scotland and stuff, get given your BBC ID and stuff. It was utterly exhilarating, from the first few hours that I walked in.
Yeah, see, that's the thing too, is that like even when interviewing for places, or just like if somebody goes to buy a car or get an apartment or get a house, you walk into several and some are just kind of like, meh, all right. And then every now and then you walk into one and you're like, oh, there's something different here. This feels like I could be here. Oh, I think I would like to walk in this way. I think I'm like, and like every single thing, you're like, oh, I think I could even wash my hands here. Like, I don't know, this feels, I could eat my lunch over there. Yeah. Just those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the energy and all of that of like walking around, I don't think that people give enough credit to those little ways of not just the objective information about it, but like how do you actually feel in it too?
It felt incredible. And getting my first day induction around the building, you got to know all the things. Walking into the live, the studio spaces and all that, I was like, this is amazing. And one thing I didn't tell you, when I was in Scotland in the boarding school, I got into the theater, like doing the stage management, stage lighting, and that sort of stuff. And I was never a performer. I was never on stage, but I was the one, planning the lighting setups and working on that, doing all the stage, moving props around during, scene changes. So I loved that sort of like being behind the scenes, being in places that people don't usually get to go, getting privileged access to stuff. These are all little feelings and parts that I'm like, that's a cool feeling. I'm going to bank that for later. And I didn't know it at the time, but it's a huge part of documentary filmmaking, is being able to go to cross that line and being places that people don't get to go to very often, meet people you don't often get to meet, like having that privileged access. And again, I think as soon as I walked through the doors of the BBC that first time, I was like, okay, all of those feelings just started like welling back up again. And I was just like, I was riveted. And, even the first job they had me doing is now what is probably one of the most boring jobs that you can do in television, which is called logging, which is essentially sitting down with all of the footage from a shoot. So a shoot might last, I don't know, a week, and they may have, I don't know, dozens of hours of footage that, different clips. Every time they push record, stop recording, got all the different clips in the camera. They put them into a system, and some person is going to sit down, watch every clip, and then write what happens to the clip. Is it a good take? Is it a bad take? Did the presenter nail the script? Did they mess it up? Was it in focus? Like all of those notes has to be done by someone. And not many people like to do it because it's a long and arduous job. But for someone like me, I was like, oh my God, I'm actually getting to see behind the scenes. And like the presenters like swearing when they messed up a take and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, this is so cool.
And for you though, you're having this immersion of like what was there and what was possible, and like even starting to discern on your own of like, here's the elements of what makes something that captured my interest and what made something that is not useful from that get-go. How fascinating. Because somebody could be like, oh, well, hey, Chris, we're going to take a lot of footage here and some's going to be good and some's going to be not really useful. And like, okay, but you got to experience that.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
100%.
Fascinating.
And that was my first week. And then they drag you into meetings, like development meetings, where all the heads of departments are all like throwing ideas out. And, they even ask me like if I've got ideas or just wanted to contribute. And I didn't have any ideas. I was like freaking terrified to speak up at that stage. But The second week they put me out on a shoot, and that was probably when I was out on shoot. I think that for listeners, like there's multiple parts of documentary production. Roughly speaking, there's three main parts. There's the sort of pre-production, the production, and the post-production. So pre-production is like the research and the planning.
Yep.
Production is essentially all the filming. Post-production is all the editing and the delivery. And, usually people end up in, various parts of those categories. And I loved the production part of it. And I realized that when I went on the first shoot, which was for a very, low budget BBC4 documentary about botany. And it was like the history of botany. It probably had like 1,000 people watching it or something on BBC4. But they did this amazing story about, I think it was a Russian or a Ukrainian, I can't remember the exact scientist, but one of the main scientists involved in like genetics at the time and how botany was evolving at that time. And essentially his research got him in trouble with the KGB and they wanted to like take him out and all this kind of stuff. So we were telling that story.
Yeah.
And so the director was like, okay, guys, I've got this idea. The presenter is going to walk up this like dark, forested road in the middle of Scotland somewhere that they'd found. And he's going to be wearing like as if he's dressed for the times, in sort of Soviet era Russia, doing what we call a piece to camera. So talking the script to camera. And in the background, there's going to be like an old like 1920s Phantom Rolls Royce we're going to hire and drive up the road. And then as he finishes his script at the line, you guys are going to turn up and then you're going to pretend to be KGB agents and grab him and throw him in the back of the car and drive off. And so it was basically like me and the assistant producer at the time got dressed up in like trench coats and hats and whatever. Yeah. And I was like, this is extraordinary. Like, we're getting paid to like have this much fun. So yeah, we like jumped at the back of the Rolls Royce with the producer and just followed his lead and grabbed the presenter and had my first tiny cameo on a BBC show. And
now you're no longer behind the scenes, you're in the scene,
Well, this is the thing with a lot of documentaries, we end up on camera some way, shape or form because you need extras and you need people running around the background or something or other. So I've made dozens of cameos in my time in the industry, but at that point I was hooked. It was all the stuff on shoot, which I thought this is the most exciting part of it. And that kind of endured pretty much up until now, actually. It's so much fun because it's the travel, it's the excitement of being in a situation where you're live, you're rapidly problem solving, the stakes are high. The most expensive part of a documentary is often the production, the amount of money spent per day, getting people to location, hiring the equipment and the crew and the whole shebang.
How did it go from that? So you have this unpaid thing and you're realizing, yes, this I think is really something. This is fascinating. People actually have jobs like this. Then how did that unpaid internship then turn into some sort of income opportunity and still fun?
So they have basically what happened after the internship, they have what they call the researchers pool at the BBC, which is basically you apply for it and then you're in a pool of researchers. So if they have a project come up, they go to the pool and they see who's available. So I'd gotten into the pool, but the phone wasn't ringing because I guess I didn't have many projects at that time or whatever. So I just started looking for other documentary work. So I was looking at all the different companies in Glasgow at the time. And there was, quite a few good production companies. And I started right at the bottom. I started as a runner, which is essentially getting teas, coffees, lunches, just making sure, doing the grunt work effectively, carrying equipment, packing cars and making sure everyone needs what they need. And that was it. The first job I think after that was on a project called Antiques Roadshow. I don't know if you've heard of Antiques Roadshow in the States.
Yeah. I think occasionally that kind of thing is on at my parents' house. Right?
Yeah,
but like
exactly
it's kind of like
TV.
from the beginning, you're like, I don't think so. And then you actually start watching for a little bit and it's like fascinating. And you're like, wow, that coin is worth such and such or whatever, and you're like, huh. And then you become interested even more again, because of the way that it's filmed, the way the story is shown and told becomes like, wow, huh. Yeah.
100%. And it wasn't science, but I was like, it's my first real paid job in TV. And we were doing a special version with celebrities that summer. The job was to basically drive from Glasgow with the vans. And the way that the program worked, you have two celebrities, they each get given like £400 and they got to spend it at all the antique shops. And then at the end of the week, they've got to try and sell all the knickknack that they've got. And all the money goes to charity, so it's kind of a nice thing.
That's kind of cool, like
But
a good for the world thing,
it was really nice. And we had fun celebrities and they had classic cars that we got to drive sometimes. But again, the way that was worked, because we had two teams and each team had their own little TV crew with them. So I was part of crew A or crew B, and a friend of mine that was another runner on the other team. And so, we just did that across the summer. We went to like Oxford and all different parts of the UK. I just had an amazing blast just driving around and making the show and just learning about the art of television as well. Like, because there's such small crews that I'm, talking to the cameraman and saying, hey, what are you doing with this part? How does this thing work? And cameramen love it when you ask about how things work, because if they see someone who's passionate about it, they'll give you a go on the camera. So I got to sort of learn how the camera works and got my first camera experience. And then, how the scripting and we had a really good assistant producer on that shoot who taught me about, how the schedule works and how to build a schedule for television. So being at the bottom of the rung.
It's fascinating.
I tell this to people all the time, is that, especially in this industry, you have to walk before you can run, because if you start running, you'll end up falling over. And I've seen it happen with a lot of people that try and progress so quickly through the television ranks. And sometimes, people will go really quickly and find that break maybe at the wrong time. They haven't got quite enough experience, but they found the break somehow and they became a director or whatever. And their first shoot or their first show doesn't go well. And they sometimes may never recover from that. So I found it was, so helpful for me to learn at every single rung as I went up, and sort of felt like I was overqualified for a job by the time I got into it, So I felt like once I started into it, there was a lot for me to learn, but I felt it wasn't daunting and I had enough skills that I could prove that, there's a reason that I got this job. So that's kind of, I think if anyone out there wanting to get into television, start from the bottom, learn it from the bottom up.
I think that's fascinating, because also then now you, with some of your own amazing opportunities, cruise experience, things that you've done, intimately what it feels like to be that person. And you also can understand that even though it's like, okay, from the grand scheme of things, what does it matter that this person had my coffee or my food? But if you don't have coffee or food, people are going to start getting a little more cranky. And it's like every single link of the chain is essential or it can break. And you didn't just have someone, again, you didn't just have somebody tell you this is the thing. You put yourself or were able to put yourself into that experience to be that, feel that, do that, see it from that angle, I guess.
Yeah. And the other reason I think it's so important to do it that way is that, you have to do a job to know how to manage someone else doing the job below you.
Yes.
So like if I have a runner and I've done that job for however many, projects, I become the next level up, researcher or producer, and I have a runner who's, working to me or whatever. I know how to manage them effectively, because I've done that role. I can teach them how to do it, become a mentor, not just a mentor, but a good manager. So that's another reason I think it's so important to earn your stripes as you go up through a ladder.
And so what have been some of the most fascinating opportunities you've had to I'm kind of curious. The follow-up question to this is going to be when you fall asleep, what do you dream about? Because you have so much to draw from, but what are some of the fascinating experiences that you've literally captured and helped create to bring to the world?
I mean, there's some really funny ones that always stick in my mind from my early career. That shoot I mentioned earlier when I was in Houston, Texas, the director kind of came up with this random idea at 6:00 in the morning. And it was a whole story about the subconscious mind. We were doing a whole series about, how the brain works and stuff. So the episode was about subconscious mind. And he wanted to do a story about how we're all on autopilot driving around in the morning. We don't really notice stuff, especially if we're doing our usual route to work. Anyway, so somehow he came up with this idea of dressing me up in a costume and sticking me on a sidewalk and filming people's reactions as their sort of subconscious mind gets broken out of their zombie state or whatever. So he's like, Chris, we got to go and find you a costume. So we went down to a costume store. I found one found a bumblebee outfit, and we found a storyline, found a briefcase out of a prop shop, and I was a bumblebee going to work.
Busy
And
bee.
I was a busy bee. And it was just one of those, again, it came back to me like that very first experience being the sort of KGB agent,
Yeah.
like dressing up and getting on camera. And I was like, this is the strangest thing. Also, it was so hot. It was the middle of the summer. It was like 40 degrees, which is whatever, like 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And I was in this like synthetic bee costume with a big head. I'll send you a photo later.
Yeah.
That was a real seminal moment. But I mean, the more dramatic ones came a little bit later in my career, because I guess, you again, earning your stripes, I got, experience on a film shoot. And I was like, great, you can do a film shoot in the UK. Then you're like, okay, great, we're going to send you abroad. We're going to send you to America or wherever to do international film shoots. And then after that, it's like, okay, you can do international film shoots. Okay, can you do hostile environment stuff? Like, can you go to the weird and wonderful places and not only stay focused and do your job in those kinds of environments, but deliver the goods, stay creative and manage to solve problems in really tricky environments. So I got an opportunity, actually the same director who was on the Bumblebee shoot I just mentioned, he was the one who recommended me for a large National Geographic project called One Strange Rock, which was about 2016, 2017, I think, came out. Will Smith was the host of the show. And they had some of the most extraordinary shoots on there. I was abseiling into active volcanoes and not just filming in there, but we were living inside the crater for a week with like gas masks and
Wow.
tents and dealing with lava bombs. And, we couldn't take the gas masks off because of the sort of filamented microscopic glass that gets in your lungs and destroys your lungs. And then we would go
So you
into
just changed out the cartridge? Like, how often do people wear, well, I mean, as scientists, occasionally you'd have to put on your respirator, right?
Yep.
And like that
Yep.
thing would last forever until your next annual fit test. But now if you're living there for a week, is it like 6 hours, 8 hours?
We depends on how the wind was blowing. If the wind was
Interesting.
blowing the right way, okay, cool, we got fresh air. But if the wind had changed and we're sort of all the volcanic gases were coming back through to where we were filming, we put the gas. We would sleep with them as well, just as a precaution. So
Yeah.
we had filters. I can't remember how often we changed them, but that the climb in and out the crater on the inside was a good like 400 meters, which is like, I don't know, like several hundred feet,
Yeah.
800 feet. I don't know, could be a lot. But that was extraordinary, and we had to evacuate that shoot a day early, because the volcano, it was just a lava lake, so it's not supposed to erupt, but from a side vent, it started erupting, and it was sort of spewing lava bombs. So I've been on shoots in caves in New Mexico, really deep, dark caverns that, again, go in and live there for a week, because we were filming so deep in the cave that we had to live there, for efficiency reasons. And, again, abseiling 200 feet into these caves and crawling through tight squeezes. And some of the most extraordinary places I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm trying to think, even shoots outside of that. I had an amazing shoot with the actor Joseph Fiennes, his cousin, the explorer Ranulph Fiennes. We were traveling through Egypt for about 5 weeks. And we had, bomb scares, and because we were, traveling through parts. I mean, we had celebrities with us, so we had an armed escort.
Yeah.
And at one point, we had to have a bomb squad with us just because of the threat that we had, and in that region. I did another amazing shoot for Discovery Channel again when I was a sort of assistant producer, which was traveling through all of South America. We spent about 10 weeks. We started in I think the story started in Brazil, and essentially was the two people on camera had to land in Rio de Janeiro with nothing but a backpack and a passport, and make their way over 10 weeks to the top.
Oh, wow.
Through earning odd jobs and favors and whatever.
Yeah.
Hijacking, hijacking, definitely not hijacking, hitchhiking. And we were the follow crew. So we were making sure that they had, they were filming a lot of their own stuff, but we were filming, what we call all the B-roll, essentially.
Yeah.
And so it was extraordinary going out through the weirdest and wonderful parts of South America. Again, slightly sketchy, slightly dodgy, going through checkpoints at times. And more recently, I was filming in minefields at certain parts of the world, with live mines in touching distance, blowing up munitions. So it's honestly, again, as I said at the beginning, one of the best parts of this job is that we get to go places that few people get to go. And that's such an exciting part for me. It's kind of one of the big reasons that I do it, you
Mhm.
know. And I could go on all day about all
I mean, it's
I'm
fascinating.
literally just trying to
And,
scratch my head about other cool stuff I've done.
and so, as you dream, do you wake up in the middle of a volcano, or do you like concoct things together? Interestingly, like your dreams have to be so vivid because of the experiences, and even like whenever somebody's is in somewhere, like let's say you're in something like Disney and you're in the Avatar ride or whatever, right? Like, and then if you're trying to capture a couple photos, it just doesn't compare. And yet, the things that you captured are so imagination evoking, fascinating, amazing. And yet, there's more, right? Because if I'm like, but wait, this is like, what was it really like to be in this whole environment? And so I feel like your dreams are not just like you missed a paper and you woke up late for class. Like, they've got to be.
I again, like I've been so lucky to do the stuff that I've done, and again, like even just the one that comes to mind now is that like, I love heights, and I've always been a really big fan of heights, which is such an unusual thing. I love being up high,
Yeah.
and so the one, if there was one to dream about, I had this extraordinary shoot in Hong Kong, which the story was about lightning and the power of lightning and
Oh, wow.
whatever,
Yeah.
and so the director, it wasn't me at the time, but the director had come up with this idea that's like, okay, there's a lot of lightning in Hong Kong. Basically, it was my job to find a city with a lot of lightning, problem one. So I was like, okay, great, let's narrow it down to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
What's a lot of places, a lot of skyscrapers? Okay, Hong Kong's good, you know. And where do they hit a lot? Okay, still Hong Kong. There must be a lot of lightning conductors at the top of these buildings, and there must be people that monitor those lightning conductors. Great. So we narrowed all that sort of stuff down. Found a building. I flew to Hong Kong to do a recce and to build relationships with a particular. Well, we had a fixer set up a lot of meetings with different skyscraper management companies, and one of them allowed us to essentially film their lightning conductor engineer climbing to the very tippy top of the spire, which itself was like 10 stories or something.
Yeah.
Just was just literally a narrow pole
Yeah.
with a ladder on it. And they basically said, well, you can't fly a drone up there because of various reasons. And actually, no, they can fly a drone, but we wanted some close-up shots
Yeah.
of the conductor because a drone can't get close enough
Yeah.
for proximity reasons. So I was like, well, I've got climbing experience, and I had gotten my sort of IRATA International Rope Access Training level 1.
Yeah.
So I got my gear on, grabbed a camera, and climbed to the top of this incredibly thin spire on a ladder.
With a
And I've
camera.
got a photo. I've got with a camera strapped around me, and essentially I was sat on sort of a dinner plate sized plate at the top of the tower, top of the spire, looking down on the
Wow. Yeah.
engineer as he was sort of performing maintenance on the lightning conductor. And that was a moment where you're looking down. I've got this wide angle lens, and I see the conductor, obviously, but then just Hong Kong, the entire cityscape of Hong Kong spread out. And I was just like, this is the most surreal pinch me moment. And that is a real like one. And the other thing is that we had to come down quickly because a typhoon had been coming in that afternoon. So we were like filming, and then this squall came in, and the tower and the spire started doing this. And I heard on the radio, like the guy's like, you need to come down now, like right now, right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we didn't make it down. We only made it halfway down. There's a little like safety point. So I had to wrap the camera in my sort of shirt
Yeah.
to protect it from the rain that was now pelting us from the back. And I had to wait for the squall to subside so that we could descend the rest of the tower.
Oh.
And that was just, I got down there completely drenched. The camera was fine, got the amazing shots, and again, just pumping with adrenaline.
Yeah. Yeah. And see, that's the thing too, that like how you're part of how you're hardwired and conditioned is just like, yes, this is fun, versus some others like just getting rained on is like their worst experience ever. I can't believe, and that like, that's so fascinating. Okay. I'm kind of curious. Did you ever go explore that trail down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon?
I don't think I've been back to the Grand Canyon since. I have to be honest with
Interesting.
you.
Yeah.
I have not,
Sorry
but
to
I
unlock
would.
that for you.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, I maybe it was like this. This is the thing. Like the world is filled with so many cool places, and I was like, meh. Even though I was a kid,
Yeah.
I've done the Grand Canyon. But yeah, for sure, if I had the opportunity again, I would probably do hike to the bottom and then do some sort of kayaking or rafting or something at the bottom. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I think Disney Adventures has a thing where they do take people on trips, like kind of like choreographed, cooler vacations that you can think of on your own. So just nuts. You may be able to leverage
Interesting.
connections there. Just say
There you go. Yeah.
Disney Parks, Disney Cruise, Disney Plus, Disney Adventures has that thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's fascinating. Okay. I could talk to you for like, I don't know, probably a whole year. A whole year and still not be anything but fascinated. I'm curious, now from this vantage point, how do you define authentic success for you?
An authentic success. I mean, I guess that again, it's going back to kind of what we were saying at the beginning. Is more that you're not trying to please other people. You're not trying to compare yourself to others. You're not trying to make other people proud. You're trying to compare yourself to one person, and that's yourself. And does this, whatever it is, does it feel like it gives you purpose? Does it feel like you can continue doing this for 20 years? And I guess on the smaller scale, like, are you proud? Have you made yourself proud of it's my case, if I've done a project or whatever, are you proud of the work that you're doing? If not, for me personally, I would say that I was unsuccessful at that particular project or that particular show that I did. If I do have a sense of pride, even if it fails critically or whatever, or if I'm proud of parts of it, that's still a success for me. It's trying to see. I think that's the most important thing. Is it's not success in other people's eyes, and it's success in your own eyes. And I think that's hard when everyone, especially I can only speak from sort of documentary filmmaking kind of stuff, when all the accolades and people winning awards and trying to win BAFTAs and, Emmys and whatnot. And for sure, that is 100% a measure of success, but it's just one measure of success. There are many measures of success. And ultimately, the one I think that you have to stay truest to is that, do you feel like you are proud of what you've done, and that I think is the most important.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like it to also be like, are you loving your life? And is your career fueling your ability to enjoy your life even further? I think yours definitely from living all over the world to now settling on Indonesia, continuing to do really fascinating things. And I also feel like the fact that you had sales training at I talked to a gentleman in an earlier episode. I had actually met him in person. His name's Jeffrey Kiplinger, and his book was From Expert to Entrepreneur, and how as scientists, it's so tricky to get out of that logic brain into the customer experience and how to connect with that. So even the fact that you had that so early, even though you didn't necessarily love sales, I'm sure that has served you in your ability to highlight how you can be amazing for a particular shoot and opportunity, aside from your fascination with sports and this beautiful combination, and you're kind of fun to get along with too. Like, yeah. I mean, anyway,
half of this job of being a producer, a documentary producer, is convincing people to come on the shoot, to be a part of the project, to take time out of the day, often for free, I will add, and maybe even expending some of their own resources, for the benefit of being on the show. But it's people skills. It's just basic people skills. And I think a lot of my upbringing has helped me develop. I can go to anywhere from all over the world and find a connection with people.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that's helped me so much. Again, I was developed that sales career, I think, to learn how to, again, further hone that communication. But again, it was honed. It was almost feels like it was all set up to really be honed for my work in documentaries as a producer and as a director. Because producer, you're doing all the behind the scenes stuff, and as a director, you're communicating with your crew and your talent on screen and trying to put whatever's in your head as a vision inside their head and get them to execute it. And if you can't communicate, and have those people skills, you're not going to get very far.
That's right. That's right. It's so fascinating. It's so fascinating. All right. How do people find you? How do people connect with you?
Absolutely. I mean, you can find me if you want to see my personal stuff. I'm on Instagram, at Chris Baron 7. But I've got a podcast as well that would be great for people to check out. It's called No Ordinary Monday. And we essentially on the show, I bring on people who've had amazing career experiences. It could be, I've just had a Secret Service agent who has an amazing story of catching the king of counterfeit.
Oh, wow.
I've had a pilot who had crash landed in the Pacific Ocean and had to be rescued, and this incredible story. I've got, all sorts of weird and wonderful careers, from parapsychologists who are studying the science of ghosts to firefighters who've survived PTSD from the experience they've had. So, it's all kind of very story driven. And I'm kind of harking back to my skills as a documentary storyteller, both as an interviewer and the way that I construct the episodes into they kind of build this story of the character, and then I throw them into, reliving the most extreme day of their career. And a lot of the time that can be death defying. I've got a cave scientist who almost died in a flood in China. Or actually one of the first I ever did, and one of the sort of inspirations for the podcast, was my uncle, who was essentially a paramedic in Scotland during the Lockerbie bombing, which a lot of, I guess that was 1980s, 89 maybe, but probably a lot of your listeners of a certain age would be familiar with, which is a devastating plane bombing over Scotland with a lot of Americans on board, but everyone died. But my uncle was essentially the first on the scene as a paramedic, and was looking for survivors, and his recounting of that story was just so it's just so incredible, and the way he tells it, from the moment he gets the phone call to driving out in the storming rain to, trying to find dazed locals whose houses have been crushed by plane engines, to finding the iconic nose cone of the plane just resting upside down in a field. Incredible. So that's essentially what we do on the show. And they're not always as harrowing. They're fun as well. I just had a really interesting one about an orchestra conductor who was paid to come to a billionaire's birthday party.
Oh, wow.
And it was just this, and it was basically, he was in an undisclosed location. He was not allowed to know where it was or what he'd be doing. He just had to get on a plane to an undisclosed location in the middle of, let's say, one of the former Soviet Union countries. And it just, this story he tells is just so chaotic, like this vodka fueled,
wow,
weird adventure of calamity. And so, yeah, they're fun stories.
It's fascinating. I had an opportunity to listen to a few episodes, and it is amazing. So the work that you do just brings so much joy, fascination, imagination, all of those, whether it's a picture or whether it's a podcast or whether it's a video. But thank you, Chris, for the impact, for listening to yourself, for continuing to choose what you felt was more of your purpose, or more of what you'd enjoy, what you would be fascinated with, because it really shines through your work. And thank you for sharing parts of your story with us here. It's been fascinating. I genuinely appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. It's been such a fun conversation.
Thank you so much. Chris, thank you for sharing a definition of authentic success that is grounded and true. You named that shift so clearly. Success stops being about approval and becomes about self-respect, pride in your work, and alignment with who you are. Thank you for showing us that awe is not random. It's a signal, and when you follow it, you build a life you actually love. Thanks for listening to Your Next Success with Dr. Carolyn Sengel. Remember, authentic success is yours to define and includes aligning your career to support the life you want.